Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us to the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse around sustainability and climate change. Before we commence the session today, a brief safety announcement during the event here at the Stein Auditorium. TERI is a health, safety, and environment certified organization. In case of any untoward incident, like fire evacuation is required, you are required to exit from the auditorium through the fire exit gate nearest to you, without any panic. There are 7 exit gates for this auditorium, 4 on the ground floor, right, left, and 2 main entrances. There is 1 exit on the stage and 2 exits in the balcony, which are also the entrances to the balcony. In case of fire, fire marshals will take position in the aisles and exit gates to help you evacuate. As we proceed further, it is my great privilege to host you and on behalf of the entire WSDS and TERI family. My name is Riya Malhotra and I will be introducing a fantastic line of speakers for the Valedictory Session on mainstreaming sustainable development for collective action. With any further ado, I would now request Mr. Nitin Desai, Chairman, the Energy and Resources Institute, for the address. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, friends. And we welcome the Minister, Mr. Hardeep Puri, the Secretary of the UNFCCC, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, Shaman Steele, Pratibha Singh, Mr. Ugo, Ajay Mathur, Bhanu Swarup. I'm very happy that they're all here today. Valedictory is supposed to be an evaluation of, when a student does a valedictory in a graduation, he's supposed to be the top student, and he does that valedictory, and he's supposed to describe all that he gained from his education, plus what needs to be done in future. Now, I'm not sure we have all the time for all that. What I would just say is that I do believe that over the past 3 days, the sessions that we have had have been very, very fruitful. They've included a wide range of people involved in the whole area of development, sustainable development, not just in climate change, but the full range of things. If I had to get some messages out of what we heard over these 3 days, they're to some extent optimistic, in the sense that they were all presenting solutions for problems that we are seeing today in terms of climate, whether it is we're talking of climate finance, whether we are talking of the management of sustainability in areas like agriculture, water, etc. So there was a sense of positivity in terms of people putting forward positive suggestions on how things could be done. The focus of it, in terms of the theme of our conference, maintaining the focus on sustainable development and collective action, came out very strongly. We have certainly, over the past 30 years, seen an improvement in the awareness that is there amongst people. We have seen an improvement in the consensus on scientific issues, particularly on issues like climate change. We have seen a growing engagement of corporates in the whole area. When we did the Rio conference, there was just about 20 CEOs who got involved. That has changed dramatically since then. We also have many more global NGO groups who bring people together and act as advocacy groups. And we have organizations like TERI, which are combining work on policy issues with work on technological development, research and analysis, and the full range of things which we need to do in order to promote the idea of sustainable development. And of course, the focus is very much on collective action, not just on climate change, but also in other areas. These are some of the messages that came across when we met. I would now say that we also look at what we need to do in future. I would argue that perhaps the one area which needs more work is bringing countries together, so that increasingly countries, when they talk issues of sustainable development, whether it's on climate or whether it is on anything else, are looking at it from a global perspective and not just from a perspective of national interest. And that is perhaps one message which did come across in the sessions that we have had, that we still need to do far more creative work on promoting collective action. And for this reason, we all welcomed the strong role that India is playing in G20 this year, particularly its focus on the Green Development Pact. This is perhaps the first time in a G20 that a country has decided to pick on green development as a major theme to be pushed in a G20 meeting, which is something which is very welcome from the perspective of getting sustainable development as a part of collective action together. These are some of the messages that we came across in the sessions that we've had. But we will hear much more from our guests on what do we need to do in order to maintain this focus on sustainable development and collective action in the years that are to come and the time that is to come. I must also thank all of you for participating in this. We have probably not been able to give you enough time to question the people who are here, but your presence has certainly added a great deal to the success of this session. So with this, I want to thank all of you for participating, all of the participants who have graced us on the podium, and above all to thank the staff of TERI, Vibhadhavan, Shaili, Kedia, and all the others who have worked with them in making this conference a great success. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your remarks. I now would like to share a recorded global leadership message of Her Excellency Ms. Nala Budin, Prime Minister Tunisia. May I request the EV Console team to please play the recorded message.
Dr. Nitin Desai, Chairman of the Energy and Resources Institute, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the TERI Institute for inviting me to the 2023 edition of the World Summit on Sustainable Development, an annual event that has become an essential global platform for discussing sustainable development as a shared global goal. Since its creation 2 decades ago, the WSDS has succeeded in launching a rich and open high-level dialogue between all stakeholders on crucial issues related to sustainable development, such as climate and energy challenges, sustainable development goals, innovative international partnership, governance, etc. Thanks to the richness of its discussions and the high level of speakers and panelists, the WSDS constitutes a forum for deliberation, anticipation, and proposals to help governments and international organizations develop their strategies and initiatives in different sectors. And this is at the very heart of the global action that you have always advocated in order to raise awareness among political decision makers and public opinion of the importance of the global challenges we face. Indeed, multi-stakeholders platforms, by their informal and open nature, bring together a wide range of participants, official and unofficial, which offers a better knowledge and understanding of these intertwined challenges. This inclusive multi-stakeholders process can only lead to greater ownership of decisions and outcomes so that our action is truly collective, hence successful. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that the current international context is critical, especially for developing and least developed countries, which, against the backdrop of the post-COVID-19 crisis, are increasingly confronted with the fallout from the war in Ukraine, climate change, and the unprecedented rise in food and energy prices. These are all challenges which can, in the absence of a rapid and collective response, undermine the efforts of the international community in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and further widen the gap between North and South, between ambitions and achievements. But as COP28 approaches, allow me to focus my remarks more on the challenges of climate change and to underline a few actions that I consider priorities. First, at the national level, it's up to all governments to initiate a comprehensive review of their economic development policies, taking into account their national capacities and specificities. In this regard, we have devised in Tunisia a development strategy that is carbon neutral and resilient to climate change by 2050. This strategy has been submitted to the Secretariat of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change on the occasion of COP27. We have also opted for new economy alternatives in our 2023 and 2025 development plan, mainly to meet the challenges linked to the unlimited use of the future clean and renewable energies. Ladies and gentlemen, at the level of the international community, we reiterate our call on developed countries to honor their commitments in terms of climate finance based on the UN principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Likewise, it's imperative to call for a collective and shared commitment of all stakeholders, governments, international organizations, international financial institutions, private sector, civil society, to develop new and effective mechanisms for technology transfer and financing, such as debt conversion in favor of developing countries in innovative and promising projects. Faced with the scale of the fallout of climate change, we must step up our efforts towards the establishment of alternative and low carbon development and to further promote dialogue and partnership in the field of green investment. The role of multi-stakeholder platforms such as the WSDS is also important in conveying a vision of the world based on the principles of solidarity, cooperation, and sharing experiences, in accordance with the principles and foundations of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. It's in this spirit that this year's edition of the WSDS, under the umbrella theme Mainstreaming Sustainable Development for a Collective Action, will address the right key messages for the G20 under the Indian presidency and to the COP28 summit. To conclude my remarks, I would like to reiterate my thanks to the TERI Institute and express my hope that the WSDS will always be the loud voice of the Global South on issues related to sustainable development and climate change. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Her Excellency, for the recorded message and sharing some valuable insights and for the priority action that we all require. I now have the pleasure to invite Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, Honorable Union Minister for Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, with us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start by welcoming the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC to India. I'm given to understand that this is one of your first visits after you assumed this very important post. On a personal note, I want to share with you that I think I was few days into a new job as India's permanent representative in New York, literally a few days, when we had to contest the election for that post, and we found ourselves pitted against a sitting executive secretary from a very important country. And the gentleman who was our candidate had a very close association, was TERI. In fact, I used to think he was TERI. So I'm particularly pleased to welcome you here today. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the European Union to India, Mr. Ugo Astuto, Justice Pratibha Singh, to whose friendship I lay a claim, and I'm very happy that you are here to provide a particular perspective. Nitinji, Ajayji, Vibhaji, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Now, maybe this is what happens when you grow old, but I was asking some of my colleagues in the speaker's room. I recall having done this on some earlier occasions, and then one of them whispered to me, this is the third time you've been involved in something like this. So it's not bad, but you know, I go back to a period when this endeavor was called the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. And it has evolved from there. When this Delhi Sustainable Development Summit took shape and it evolved, some of the multilaterally set processes had not even started. I remember I went to New York in, I think, 2009. That is when we were winding up the Millennium Development Goals, when the groundwork was being laid for the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the issues which I remember the most is that the Global South at that point of time wanted to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals, or the Agenda 30 as they came to be known, should avoid the mistakes, somewhat costly, of the Millennium Development Goals, which were essentially the product of some conceptual, intellectual work done in the think tank of the West, in the OECD, and they came in the form of prescriptions. Whereas the Sustainable Development Goals were negotiated from ground upwards, and they reflected the stakeholder concern about how these should reflect. And I think those 17 goals go a very long distance in doing that. Many other things have happened during this period. The respective COPs. I believe you had the privilege of the president of the COP28 here. I was with him when we celebrated India Energy Week a few days ago. But we are also meeting at a time when India has assumed the presidency of the G20. And I should like to recall, for those of us who are not perhaps as familiar with this, that the G20 itself was conceived, and the G20 in its present form as a summit-level group took birth at a time of a crisis. This was the world financial and economic crisis which took place in 2008 or thereabouts, and it arose in the real estate sector, specifically the subprime lending segment of the real estate sector in the United States. But then it grew rapidly, and the contagion which spread. And the multilateral institutions as they existed then, with due respects to all my friends with whom I worked over the years in these institutions, they found themselves by and large at a loss as to how to address that crisis. And out of that crisis was born the G20. Thereafter, very important developments took place. They took place, the London summit, I think, some of the other summits, and the G20's consideration of these issues and the kind of recommendations and action the G20 took helped calm the global situation. I'm only saying this to fast forward a few years later, and when we come to 2023 and India is assuming the presidency of the G20, we have, if I may submit for your consideration, we are faced with multiple crises, but three which specifically bear mention are the food crisis, the fertilizer crisis, and the fuel crisis. And I believe all three have very much a solid link with the kind of discussion that we have to have and which you are having on issues of sustainable development. I can tell you that in India, I have always maintained that the Millennium Development Goals succeeded because a large developing country, you can quarrel whether it's a developing country with an economy of $12 trillion US now, but it succeeded, MDGs succeeded because China succeeded in pulling millions of its countrymen out of poverty, hundreds of millions, with a little bit of help from the other members in the Global South, India, Nigeria, South Africa. But I submit to you that the Sustainable Development Goals will succeed because India will succeed. And if you look at the report card of the progress that India has registered, I must say also, I must submit with some humility that when I go to New York and when I went first with my colleague, I was then chairing RIS, to present a report card on the SDGs, one of the points we made was that when the Prime Minister assumed office in May of 2014, all the new flagship programs which are anchored in sustainable development, they took shape in June 2015. So in some ways that the Indian programs had already been visualized, and of course then came the 2030 agenda, and we are fast towards this thing. I'm not going to spell out too much about some of the details we've done in India, because at the time given to me will not permit that. But I do want to say that despite the pandemic, which was a crisis many countries had to face, we did not, during the pandemic or even after the pandemic, at least in the two ministries I have the privilege of being associated with, Housing and Urban Affairs and Petroleum and Natural Gas, we have not deviated a minute from our commitments which we have made at the international level and what we are doing domestically. Whether it is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is a very ambitious scheme which we give houses to millions of our countrymen living below poverty line, or what is called in the economically weaker section, that the title of the house has to be in the name of the lady of the house. So I think that's SDG 5, if I remember correctly. Or if you look at SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 13, climate action, all of them we have been seeing. So insofar as sustainable development is concerned, but I think the visionary proposals in the Panchamrit Action Plan that the Prime Minister put forward at COP26, they provide the ambitious response needed to push the sustainable development agenda. More recently, the Prime Minister's life mission, personalizing climate action, I think fits in with our own philosophy. And the transition that we are making in the energy ecosystem, I only want to spend a minute or two on that. I had the privilege many years ago of serving as India's ambassador to Brazil. At that point of time, the then government wanted modest 5% biofuel blending in 10 of our states and union territories. And I can tell you, in spite of the efforts made by the then government then, we never crossed 1.4%. And that 1.4% we reached also after some effort. The Prime Minister had set a 10% biofuels blending target by November 2022. We achieved that 5 months in advance. The Prime Minister set a target of 20% blending. By 2030, we've advanced that by 5 years, and we did it by 2025. We are going to do it by 2025. We need to implement a 20% biofuel blending. We need, I think, what is called 1,000 crore liters of ethanol, coming from different feeds, from maize, from agricultural waste, from rice husk, etc. And I can tell you, I just did a review meeting now. We'll be way beyond the target soon, and that mindset we have of 20% blending also, I think, will give way, because the cars which are coming on our roads today, whilst we have a 20% blending philosophy, they're all coming in what is called E85 engine. Like in Brazil, you can put in any amount of ethanol into those. Our policy on compressed biogas, our second generation biofuels policy, third generation policy, which we are making ethanol already 90 million liters from agricultural waste. For those of you not familiar with India, the burning of agricultural waste of parali is a perennial problem which has political overtones, but I think this is another way of solving it. When we mix 10% of ethanol in fuel, it saved us something like $5 billion on the import bill. And we were, as a result, in a position to give that amount of money back to the farmers. When we do 20% blending, which we are, as I said, we are planning to do in the next 2 years, the results will be even more impressive. The green hydrogen policy, again, is something, and I say this because a lot of discussion takes place on green hydrogen. I submit to this group where there is domain knowledge, there's expertise, that green hydrogen, except in liquid form as green ammonia, you can perhaps transport it. But green hydrogen doesn't lend itself to too much of storage and transportation. Therefore, green hydrogen will be a success in countries which have the capacity to respond to a growing demand, which can produce green hydrogen and which can consume it. And again, I can tell you from a review I just took a few hours ago, both our private sector, specifically the private sector, and our refineries are all geared up to use green hydrogen. In a cabinet decision a few weeks ago, a decision was taken that we bring the manufacture of electrolyzers under the PLI scheme, which means that what you require for green hydrogen production, which is the fuel of the future, you need green energy at reasonable prices, and you need an electrolyzer. And you can have as much green energy as you like. Now, both the electrolyzer production means cost. The ambassador, who's my friend, sent to me the visiting senior, I think he was the vice president of the European Investment Bank, and he was interested in discussing green hydrogen in India. And he said, I have €1 billion waiting to partner with Indian entities which are doing the green hydrogen. Independent of that, there's a lot of private sector money flowing in. Our companies are teaming up with companies in Europe, in Germany in particular, for the export of green ammonia. Singapore is setting up an electricity plant using GE machinery. I signed a MOU with my counterpart in order to be able to, Indian companies to supply green ammonia for that. So there's some fascinating things happening. I think and I'm going to conclude by this, the G20 2023 India's presidency, apart from coming at a time when there are multiple crises and India has its own way of addressing those, many of our experiences and what we're doing lend themselves to replication in the global south in a manner where the problems are largely similar. Equally, I would say that at the global level, perhaps what you require is a paradigm shift in the international climate regime to move from a country-centric approach to a people-centric approach to climate action. And the multilateralism in this, and I know the multilateral institutions are also under some strain, but I think it's always periods of strain and challenges where systems either reinvent themselves and become stronger. So let me conclude by once again welcoming the Executive Secretary, Mr. Simon Steele. Welcome to India. I hope your experience here and my own gratitude for this. If this is correct, then this is the 4th time I'm participating in this, and I'm good to be amongst old friends and I see several of them in the audience. I sometimes miss the time when I had the privilege of attending more such sessions. But thank you very much, and my very best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your encouraging presence and insightful remarks, and for giving us an outlook of India across sustainable development. I now have the pleasure to invite Mr. Simon Steele, Executive Secretary, UNFCCC. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the very warm welcome and the optimism and hope. Listening to the Minister, the vision, the ambition, and most importantly, the action that is being taken is truly inspiring. So colleagues, friends, it is truly a pleasure to be here and to be addressing you this afternoon. And after hearing all of these discussions and the discussions that have been taking place over the course of the last 2 or 3 days, I believe you feel exactly like I do. Clear-sighted about the magnitude of the challenges we face, yet energized by the historic possibility of now. Over the next 10 months, we have a unique opportunity to provide the course correction the world needs on climate change and make COP28 a transformational moment in what must be a decisive decade of action. You recognize it. I recognize it. And when I took this job 6 months ago, I made it clear I was going to do things differently to achieve it. When reminding everybody that the key date of 2030 is now only 7 years away, where we need to halve emissions and ensure was just 7 years away, I said I would expect progress, that I would push for progress, public and private, and ensure that leaders are held accountable for their commitments. With the aim of doing things differently, I am here committing myself to providing an update from the UNFCCC on the status of work, mandates, and progress each quarter up to COP28. We will be delivering the first of these at the end of March. In addition to this, today I'm making my first request to all initiatives born in, around, or out of recent COPs. Feedback on your progress to the Secretariat by the June SB sessions. We collectively need the support of all the coalitions, alliances, and initiatives that are driven by state and non-state actors in order to achieve our goals on resilience and limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. I want to know, where are you on methane, on forests, coal, solar, zero emissions vehicles? How are your alliances progressing work in these areas? And how will you be delivering at COP28? Closing the massive gaps in each of the major work areas, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and finance, requires unprecedented collaboration and support at the highest levels. We look to India and its influential role as presidency of the G20 to help us deliver a clear political framework and help shape the outcomes we must see in COP28. We're all aware that the G20 is responsible for over 80% of the world's global emissions. It will be targeted policy decisions in these countries which will provide the market signals to deliver the transformation we're sitting on the cusp of. Let's zero in on 3 key areas where support and leadership is needed. First, to deliver a truly transformative global stocktake. The stocktake is the focal point of our work this year, the centerpiece of COP28, and the first time the world comes together to determine whether nations are meeting the climate goals agreed in Paris. Are we making enough progress? We already know the answer to that question. We know progress is not good enough. Doing things differently means ensuring this stocktake isn't just another synthesis report telling us what we already know. The stocktake must provide a course correction for what the climate process needs and build a tangible roadmap to 2030. I'll lay my cards on the table. The success of COP28 depends on the success of the global stocktake, or more specifically, the response to that stocktake. So what does success look like? Success is raised ambition across the board in all major work streams, backed by specific targets, milestones, and roadmaps to achieve them. It's not restricted to nations, but goes sector by sector, so it's truly comprehensive and transformative. In my opening speech to COP27, I said that we need everything, everywhere, with action taken by everyone, every single day. That's ultimately the purpose of the global stocktake. By the end of it, every government, business, and citizen should understand what they need to do to transform our economies, our societies, to build a world of climate stability and prosperity for all. Frankly, I feel the momentum we need hasn't yet been reflected. I've been blunt with my team back at the Secretariat in Bonn. With both the incoming and outgoing COP presidencies and with parties, we need to dig deeper if we want to truly rise to the opportunity presented to us through this stocktake. I extend that message to each of you. We're currently completing the technical phase of the GST, and I've requested that the team providing the synthesis report for this stage clearly identify milestones and pathways to action, not generally, but across all sectors. The second area we need support is directly related to the first, emissions reductions. Much of the ambition in the global stocktake will be about emissions reduction. We know we are way off target. We're heading for warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius or more, with disastrous consequences. We need stronger emissions commitments across the board. I am not going to stand up here and call endlessly for new NDCs. We need specifics. We need countries to come forward on how they're going to align every element of national life to their Paris commitments. As a former minister, I know this can be tricky, but with the political will, it's not rocket science. Governments must convene the stakeholders in their hardest to abate sectors, as well as work across borders to establish what the pathway to 1.5 alignment is, what policies need to be enacted, and finance or investments found to implement it. Parties, particularly G20 nations, must lead these efforts. Getting emissions down cuts across every work stream in the process. I commend India for its efforts at COP27 to drive this issue and encourage its leadership in the G20 presidency to lead calls for strengthening national targets and NDCs and long-term emission development strategies. Curbing emissions goes beyond carbon dioxide. National strategies must include methane and other greenhouse gases. So then third, financial reform. We need to reform the financial system to make it fit for a climate-resilient world. We need to vastly scale up green and climate finance, and we must reduce support for climate-incompatible finance to free up capital for climate action. This is directly from the COP27 Coven decision from the parties. Private finance remains critical to realizing climate goals, and therefore we need to reform multilateral development banks to provide more concessional lending at better terms to de-risk for climate projects. Let us be clear. This amounts to transforming the global financial system itself, but it cannot happen unless the G20 leads and drives for change that is urgently needed. We must make significant progress on this by COP28, because there can be no honest discussion on transformation unless the financial architecture is there to support it. But in the meantime, nations cannot wait for the global financial architecture to change before taking stronger climate action. Within our own climate process, we're faced with the task of designing the financial architecture for the management which respond to the need for the financing of loss and damage. The Transitional Committee will meet officially for the first time in a few short weeks. The expectations are high on delivering this outcome at the outcome from COP27. A credible outcome here not only starts to address the very real needs of developing climate-vulnerable nations around the world, but also starts to build trust within the process. So in conclusion, my friends, we know the goal, a world of justice and equity where we can build sustainable and prosperous societies for all, free from the threats of climate chaos. Today, I've identified areas of progress and where we need further support. Working differently means knocking down those barriers we all know exist, and those barriers that we have talked about for so long. We face an important 10 months ahead. I call on you to show leadership, and I pledge that United Nations climate change will work with you, however necessary, to achieve our global stocktake and COP28 goals and bring about the climate-resilient world that we all want. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful remarks and emphasizing on several crucial action points. Let us now move towards the leadership addresses. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Ugo Astuto, Ambassador, Delegation of the European Union to India. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all tonight. And let me start with what I think is a positive note, that I'm pretty sure that on this room, we all start from the same proposition, which is that we need to act now and we need to act fast to address the climate change existential challenge. And that was not a given until recently. So in a way, it's a sense, it gives us a sense of the progress made in the international public discourse. So we need to act now and fast if we want to limit global temperature rise to maximum 1.5 degrees. And thus, we have to uphold the promise we have made in Paris to future generations. I think we all recognize how dramatic the situation is depicted in the latest IPCC report. And even besides the report, I think it's a fact of life today that even at the current 1.2 degrees warming, every single country in the world is already affected by the climate crisis. We see that everywhere, be it South Asia or Europe or the rest of the world. So this reality must motivate us all. And efforts, we need to put in place efforts at all levels, be it governments, the international community, the private sector, and the civil society. And let me say here that that's why multi-stakeholder initiatives such as the World Sustainable Development Summit are so important in the present juncture. Let me say a few words about what the European Union is doing domestically to take action. So, you may be familiar with the concept of the Green Deal. The Green Deal, which has been launched in the European Union, is a total change of paradigm. The Honourable Minister was referring to something similar happening in India today. So we are integrating sustainable development in all policy areas. The objective is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And What's even more important, we have set a very clear roadmap to achieve this objective, and we have put this into law. So it's not just a vague aspiration, but it's a legal obligation for us. And we need to cut at least by 55% our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Let me note here, particularly on this day, this very sad anniversary, 1 year of Russian aggression against Ukraine. The Russian aggression has actually accelerated the green transition, not slowed it down. So far, that's what the European Union is doing domestically. But we need to work together internationally. At COP27, we took a historic decision on loss and damage. The creation of this loss and damage fund is an important step towards climate justice. And we need to make it work, notably for the most vulnerable countries in the south of the world. And we in the European Union, we take very seriously our responsibility in that respect. That's why we provide around 46% of the total global development aid in the world, and we set aside around 20 billion euro per year destined to climate funds. So the finance, the public finance is important. We also need to leverage private capital. We need to review the working of the international financial institution in order to gear them towards the climate emergency. But we also need higher ambition on cutting emissions. And here I couldn't put it better as Mr. Simon Still has just eloquently said. COP28 must deliver on this. We need more efforts from all major emitters to increase and accelerate their emission cuts. And as with all targets, it's a delivery that counts, even more than setting the targets. So in conclusion, let me simply emphasize again the need to roll up our sleeves collectively, so to say. And I'm happy to note that the European Union and India have also stepped up the joint cooperation for a green, digital, and resilient future. Minister Singh Puri just recalled the green hydrogen mission launched in India, where we hope as European Union to contribute to this success story. And that's why the European Investment Bank was here recently. And that's part of our global endeavor, which goes under the label of a global gateway. And G20. G20 is a great opportunity, obviously, to focus minds and to inject momentum in our endeavor towards the green transition. And India has rightly put climate change and the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals at the very center of its program that we fully support. But there can be no real progress on Sustainable Development Goals without progress on climate. And there can be no progress on Sustainable Development Goals without India. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks, sir, and emphasizing on the collective need for action towards sustainability. I would now like to invite Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, the International Solar Alliance, for the leadership address. Over to you, sir.
Colleagues, it's wonderful to be back. A very, very good afternoon to all of you. Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, Executive Secretary Simon Steele, Ambassador Ugo Astuto, Justice Pratibha Singh, Chairman Nitin Desai, Secretary Renu Sarup, and of course, Director General Vibha Dhawan and friends. It's such a pleasure to be here. As we meet here, and following on the words that Minister Singh and then Executive Secretary Steele said, and the leadership address of Ambassador Astuto, I think it is very, very clear that we are focusing on the place, the convergence, the place where sustainable development and climate change come together. That is at the heart of the G20 strategy in this year. It is clear that we will need, amongst others, to build up our solar capacities. Obviously, other renewable energy capacities as well, but solar capacities in particular. As we do this, it becomes important to see how we do it. The needs of the many people who do not even have access to electricity are important. There are something like 760 million people in Africa alone who still do not have access to electricity. What is the backstop technology? Diesel. We need to move away from that. To what? We look at solar mini-grids as the option. We would like the G20 summit to recognize this, to push for solar mini-grids as the option for universal energy access, and help it by providing the guarantees that are necessary to pull in the private sector financing to make up for the public sector financing which would have otherwise come into many, many years for extending the grid or for the import of diesel. It is these kinds of convergences that we need to find. We spoke of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is important because, again, it brings together the kinds of benefits that we get from non-fossil fuel use together with development benefits. Whether it is on refineries, as Minister Puri mentioned, or whether it is in the fertilizer sector, hydrogen from solar or from other renewable sources would make a great difference. This year, because of the war that is occurring between Russia and Ukraine, we are seeing globally that gas prices have, probably the prices have quadrupled. What has that meant? That has meant, for example, for India, that fertilizer has become a lot more expensive. Expect that in your food bills. In Africa, gas was not available, neither were solar panels. Why were solar panels not available? Because of supply chain constraints. And consequently, people faced hours, if not days, of blackouts, depending on where you were. It is important for us to see how we can create a geographical diversification of the solar supply chain in the years ahead. We look forward to bring this agenda onto the international system. How? We would like, for example, solar modules to be made everywhere. It makes great sense. Cells can be imported and modules can be made. It makes economic sense as long as you have the demand and as long as you have the ports and roads to get the raw materials and supply the material that you make. Yes, of course, if you're talking of more upstream, the silicon to polysilicon or polysilicon to cells, that's a lot more complicated. It needs an industrial infrastructure. It also needs the kinds of support that we are seeing, for example, through the Inflation Reduction Act in the US or the production-linked incentive in India. We need to make this understanding global. All of this means that as we move ahead, we need to work cooperatively. The UNFCCC mechanism is a wonderful mechanism. As the Executive Secretary noted, there have been many children born of the UNFCCC. We, the International Solar Alliance, are one of them. And we will stand by you, report on what we have done at the subsidiary body meetings at COP, to ensure that we learn from the implementation examples that are happening in different parts of the world so that they, in turn, can be replicated in other countries. We also note that the creation of the Loss and Damage Fund provides an opportunity for adaptation actions. But as the Executive Secretary noted, we have, in a sense, already breached the kinds of limits that we were looking at. It is now fairly clear that it is going to be difficult, if not impossible, to meet the 1.5-degree goal unless we focus on mechanisms which capture, which sequester carbon dioxide. I think as we move ahead, we would need to see multilateral fora provide an opportunity for the political discussions regarding the absorption of these rather innovative ideas, not just innovative, but actually challenging ideas on how to bring them into national dialogues. In the longer term, it will become important how are these signals provided to countries and to people. We will need mechanisms to try them out. We will need them to be of a scale that makes a difference, but yet be small enough so that if they fail, they do not represent a loss to the whole society and everybody turning off on that idea. For example, think of what would happen if solar was a great failure. Today, nearly all of us are somehow or the other related to the use of production and use of solar energy. As many of you know, I have a solar pump on my farm. And I've had it for 7 years. And it has worked. But supposing it didn't, I would have never tried a solar pump again. I would not have moved to the Solar Alliance from this wonderful organization. But solar provides us an opportunity, as do many other things. We need sandboxes where scale, but yet limited scale, can be put and we try out new ideas. That is the biggest advantage of meetings like this. You can start off sandboxes. You can start off new ideas, whether they relate to solar or whether they relate to tomorrow's ideas like carbon sequestration. I look forward to the World Sustainable Development Summit continuing to provide us with new ideas and new opportunities for action. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your insightful remarks, sir, and also emphasizing on the importance of effective scalability of the ideas. It is always a pleasure to hear from you. Let us now move towards the women in leadership addresses. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite Honorable Justice Pratibha Singh, Judge, Delhi High Court. The stage is yours, ma'am.
A very good evening to all of you. Hardeepji, Honorable Minister, Simon Steele from UNFCCC, Ambassador Astuto, all the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. I feel like an illiterate person here, unlike what I usually feel in legal seminars and legal events. But I would like to start with a small anecdote of my own practice days to start the first subheading of my speech today. I was an intellectual property lawyer, and one evening I got a call from the general counsel of one of the topmost beverage companies in India, whom I used to represent for trademark related work. He called very late evening and then he said, Pratibha, I need to meet very urgently. So I said, what happened? And lo and behold, he landed up in my office at 10 p.m. with an order from the Supreme Court of India saying you have to appear at 10:30 in the morning. So we were all very puzzled, and we retained one of the topmost senior counsels at that time, Mr. Daitley, and we landed up in court number 1 in the Chief Justice's court the next morning. Lo and behold, the only solace for us was that the other big beverage company was also called in the court. And the Chief Justice, I'll tell you his name in a minute, told us that he was driving in the mountains and he saw painted rocks on the mountains with advertisements of both the beverage companies. And he said, I'm going to appoint a committee to count the number of rocks which were painted, and each of you beverage companies is going to tell me how much you're going to deposit for the environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, the first topic I would like to say about is the contribution of the judiciary for the environment. Justice Kirpal, that was Justice B.N. Kirpal, he was the Chief Justice of India at that time. When we were in college, we all grew up reading about one Mr. M.C. Mehta, who was the environment petitioner in the Supreme Court, who used to regularly appear before Justice Kuldeep Singh. I remember very clearly, even during my practice days. The judiciary has had one of the most important contributions to this country in terms of the environment. And I'm proud to say that because it started sometime in the mid-80s in the M.C. Mehta line of litigation, then the T.N. Godavarman line of litigation, to an extent that as of today we have what is called the green bench in the Supreme Court. Yes, there are reports which say that, sometimes the orders have been far-reaching, it could have had an economic impact, but that's the whole point of sustainable development, isn't it? Every development always has an impact on the environment, and maybe sometimes things went a bit far, but that's why the whole concept of sustainable development which has been set up. The judiciary has been over-conscious of the environment for the last 30 to 40 years. The cracker ban is supervised by the judiciary every year. The Yamuna super cleaning has been supervised by the judiciary. CNG came into Delhi because of the judiciary. BS4 systems, deadlines were fixed by the judiciary. So I think the Supreme Court and the judiciary and the legal system has done its bit for the environment in India. Now let's come to the next topic, which is the women's perspective, which is what I'm supposed to speak about, both law and women. So, as we all know, builders and architects build mansions, but women build homes. One of the first contributions that women make is as mothers, grandmothers, wives, sisters at home. We learn our hygiene from home. We keep our home clean because of the women. The basic role is of the women in promoting cleanliness, whether it is any part of the country. I don't think there would be any doubt about this. The only thing that I feel we should do is have women to contribute to not just the cleanliness of their own homes, but also to the surroundings. So that, we don't clean the garbage within our own home and throw it on the street. So that's where I think one of the biggest messagings that needs to be done is this. The minute we start from that grassroots level, I think there is going to be a huge change. While technologies are very, very important, we are bringing in solar technologies, sustainable technologies, green technologies, technology transfers are taking place between foreign and Indian entities. More and more patents in green technologies are being encouraged. There are incentives given for patents in green technologies. While we do all that, we need to remember the grassroots changes that we need to bring into our country. One major area where I think we need to tap is the women who have scientific backgrounds. In our country, you will know, surprisingly, that more than 55% of the graduates coming out of universities and colleges with science degrees or mathematics degrees are women, 45 to 55%. But when it comes to innovation or patenting, women are a meager 5%. So where does the remaining 50% of the women go? Please add to that the number of men scientists who go away from India. So out of 100 graduates which India produces, I don't think even 30 remain in India to contribute within India. So therefore, we need to tap the untapped potential of women scientists who are in India, who have a creative mind, who are scientifically empowered to make sure that they contribute to the growth of a green India. And some of the endeavors which have already been taken by, for example, the Department of Science and Technology, I've been a part of that for the last 15-20 years, is to train women who are housewives, who've already kind of, brought up their children, they've all reached a, sustainable level. They are trained to become patent agents. Every year about 150 women are trained like that. It's called Kiran IPR. And they all get employment. Not a single one goes without employment. These kind of efforts need to be scaled up into a very high level. And sometimes I think, legislations which are made for benefit of women actually adversely impact women. For example, maternity benefit. I was just seeing about menstrual benefit today in the Supreme Court, which has been dismissed, and the Supreme Court said it's a policy level decision. Sometimes we think that these do help women a lot. They are needed. But let's not go for the overkill, because then that kind of results in a hesitation for employing women as well. So we need to have a balance when we are doing this and tap the untapped potential of women as an entire segment. One specific project which I would like to highlight about is a bunch of Cornell and Warwick girls who've got together, and they've started this venture called Project Bala, where they manufacture sanitary napkins which can be used over 20 months. It's reusable sanitary napkins. And that, according to me, is the kind of ventures that need to be scaled up within India. Believe you me, sanitary pads are the most non-biodegradable as on today, as manufactured today. So there are startups, there are ventures which are making biodegradable and reusable sanitary pads, which we should encourage. Let's now come to the last part of my messaging, and that is this. Some of the biggest campaigns in India which have been very successful are, for example, the film piracy campaign. When you go into any movie theater, the film industry in India was really suffering a lot. There was huge piracy. People used to camcord within theaters and then put them on the internet even before the first show had ended of the movie. So the way India tackled it and the Bollywood industry tackled it is by extremely strong messaging whenever the films are exhibited. One of the earliest campaigns which I know as a mother was the Say No to Crackers campaign within Delhi. My children would never agree to burn crackers because they were made to make posters saying Say No to Crackers when they were in 5th and 6th standard. So the Beti Padhao campaign, tobacco campaign, these campaigns have been very long and sustained and successful campaigns. So for the environment, I think we need to come out with very, very strong messaging campaigns which can reach the common man, the common woman, the common layperson on the street and make it that it's their responsibility to take care of the climate and of the environment. So with these perspectives, I feel that women themselves play a very important role even as of today in contributing to the environment, and going forward, tapping women and their potential is going to be key for sustainable development and for all the targets that we need to achieve for climate change, for tackling climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for being with us today. I request all the dignitaries to please come forward for a group picture. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. I would like to thank ma'am for the valuable remarks that she has given and for sharing some insight across sustainable development that women should take part at grassroots level. I now would like to invite Dr. Renu Swaroop, former Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, for the address. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good evening to all of you, and one advantage of being the last speaker is that all that you wanted to say has already been said, but at this very important summit, even at the risk of repeating many of the issues, I will try to bring them out because they're so very important and all the previous speakers have highlighted them so very wonderfully. Well, greetings and congratulations on such a successful summit. Excellencies, dignitaries on the dais, all the delegates here, it's indeed a pleasure to be with you. And as Dr. Vibhadavan said, this has been, we were talking in the speaker's lawn, this has been now for over 20 years, this summit. And I do feel pleased that I have been associated with your summit for many, many years in different capacities of the various activities that I was doing in the Department of Biotechnology. But thank you very much for having me here, and special thanks to Dr. Vibhadavan and her colleagues. This whole summit that we are talking about, we've got some very key words which go into the title, and that you're talking about sustainable development, you're talking about climate resilience, you're talking about collective action. All of them so intrinsically linked to each other that if we have to meet the targets of any of them, you need to strengthen the other. Without that, each of them just stays as a word on something that you would not be able to achieve. We have seen that right from the Stockholm Conference in '72 to the Earth Summit, we've been talking about issues of human development, economic development, environmental action, and this has clearly brought out the interdependency that each has on the other and the need for having a very holistic overall framework which helps us to address these and to be able to tackle this whole challenge that is before us. As we look at these global challenges that are before us today, and we know that in addition to what we are discussing, what we are talking, environment, health, food and nutrition, these are key challenges which are so closely linked to each other. And it's important that we find solutions for these only through collective action. But it's also important that once we address this, then the core principles of sustainable development get not just mainstreamed, but they get internalized. They get internalized into the institutions, into the organizations, into the framework that we build as we move on. We did, and the Honorable Minister referred to the Millennium Development Goals, and now we have the Sustainable Development Goals, and very correctly said, the Executive Secretary did highlight to us and let us know that we are inching very close now. 7 years is not much of a time that we have to be able to achieve these targets. But I think what we need to do now is we also need to look at some of those case studies where we've achieved success, and then identify what did we do correct to be able to say how do we handle the remaining parts of those challenges as we take it forward. We have done action on a number of the challenges which we talk about. We've had references made to the solar initiatives, the whole area of renewals, whether it's clean energy, renewables, solar, conservation of biodiversity, the whole area of sustainable development, looking at the whole bioeconomy area. And I myself, as the Secretary of the Biotechnology and earlier as a scientist in the Biotechnology Department, was deeply engaged in many of these activities, and I can say this with a lot of satisfaction that within the Government of India, there's been a lot of action that we've taken on for many of these multi-stakeholder networks that were established to be able to address these various issues. What now is important is, and what really has been the learning from these case studies that we took on, it's important that we focus on three very important P's, as I put it. You look into policies, and they do need to be an integral part of your policy, because unless and until they're really brought into the policy and mainstream there, it's difficult for us to move forward. But while governments and agencies do set out wonderful policies, unless and until we have programs that can implement those policies, it's difficult for us to move ahead. So you do need to have a comprehensive set of wonderful programs that help you to meet the targets or the actions that you've indicated in those policies. And most importantly, you cannot implement your policies or your programs till you have the right people to take them forward. So it's important for us to focus on those capacities, to bring in the right people who can then help us to take these policies forward. And this is really the action that has been taken. We are hoping that this is what will then move forward as we go ahead. If you look at case studies, and at this point of time, it's important, and in fact for me, the most recent case that comes to my knowledge is how we sort of tackle challenges. And since it's been so much part of what I did for some last 2 or 3 years, it comes out very spontaneously is, how did we handle the whole challenge of COVID? It came to us unawares. We were sort of caught unawares. The largest global challenge humanity has faced. But we all collectively overcame that. What did we do to be able to come together? It was a collective response. It was a collective ownership of the goals that we took on. And with these shared responses, we could deliver. Never before have we ever seen the world so much connected, despite the lockdowns, despite the travel bans. But we had supply chain disruptions. We could not really get technologies across. We got into the whole world of virtual meetings. But what was common for us is a collective action to be taken with a shared response. And I think with that, we could deliver this public health challenge. The whole vaccine story became something that the world looked at with amaze, because we could deliver a vaccine in 12 months. If we could do that, why can we not look at what it is for us to be able to address this global challenge of environment? What did we do in that? We just brought forward a robust ecosystem, and that's what was already there. We had a robust ecosystem. We brought in capacities. We brought in diversity, and I will agree with what Justice Pratibha Singh said. You need diversity and inclusion if you have to be able to address these challenges, and that's what we did as we moved on. It's all about bringing in global collaboration, bringing in the convergence in terms of not just the science, technology, because it was totally a scientific response which helped us to fight this war. But it was also looking at bringing in new innovative models with which we could address this. Whether it was innovation in terms of the technologies that we were bringing forward, whether it was innovation in terms of the financing models with which we were looking at it, or it was innovation in terms of really the governance models. And I think that really is what we have to take forward. I know that today we stand at this point where we are all trying to see what is it that we need to do as we move into the next COP, as we move into the next summit. And I think this summit that you have here is very important. It brings out important priorities that you can list out then in terms of what is it that you need to take forward. So I think our focus that we have to take ahead is to see how do we build those capacities, both in terms of research, innovation, infrastructure. How do we tap the potential of the diversity that exists, both in terms of our environmental diversity and our human diversity, and most importantly, of course, the gender diversity. And lastly, and most importantly, how do we build those skilled teams and global leadership? So we have to remember science and technology is the key way in which we can move forward. Scientific response has to be brought into this ecosystem, and we all know collectively that science, technology, and innovation knows no boundaries. It's all about looking at moving innovations from which have been developed at one place, which can be scaled up and taken across the geographies. And I think those are the models which will help us to succeed as we move ahead. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and thank you and good luck for this summit.
Thank you for your remarks, ma'am, and for emphasizing on the learning from the work we have done so far to not just mainstream, but to internalize the collective action across sustainable development. I would now request Dr. Shelly Kedia, Senior Fellow TERI, to come upon the stage for the World Sustainable Development Summit 2024 curtain raiser. Over to you.
Thank you, Ria. Before the curtain raiser, we would like to share some preliminary statistics of this year's summit participation. So what we have is 800 plus participants, which excludes colleagues from TERI University, and the volunteers. So we've really had like unprecedented participation in the summit. We've had 2 heads of state and government who've spoken at the summit through various means, one in person and one via pre-recorded video. And we've had 23 ministers, again, through various means of participation. So today's challenges for attaining sustainable development are complex, interconnected, and will need everyone to work towards creating a sustainable future. Leadership plays a crucial role in driving change. Leadership for sustainable development requires inclusivity, resiliency, adaptability, and creativity. The 2024 edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit will be organized under the umbrella theme of Leadership for Sustainable Development and Climate Justice. The discussions will focus on 6 thematic areas of sustainable lifestyles, integrating sustainable development, climate action, addressing the energy trilemma, adaptation and resilience, and nature and ecosystems. We look forward to seeing you all in 2024 again. The venue of the summit is being decided, but tentatively it is going to be at this very venue, the India Habitat Center. And the dates also we are still working out with the, but it's around the same time, mid-Feb. And tentatively, it is going to be from 14th to 16th of Feb 2024. But we will be sending the save the dates mailer soon. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you for your insights, ma'am. I would now request my colleagues, Shreyas Joshi and Dennis Baby, to come up on the stage for the launch of Act4Earth Manifesto 2023.
As global leaders and stakeholders assembled for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, it was the planet that took the much-needed center stage. As we begin heading towards the deep end of the 2030 agenda, it is now more than ever that the world needs collective visionary leaderships that put forth a collaborative front to act for Earth. In an unwelcome transition from the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, the post-COVID world has seen itself undergo a polycrisis, warranting the need to reimagine structures of governance at the international, national, and subnational levels. The problems that we face today cannot be solved by structures of yesterday. Just like the scale and impacts of climate crisis are based on geographical and socio-economic context, addressing today's challenges merits looking beyond the conventional approaches towards a regime that encourages polylateralism and polycentric approaches. Our window to act is shrinking, and it is shrinking fast. As we stand here today on a platform with a legacy of over 2 decades, having served as a means to mobilize opinion makers for driving ambition and advancing pioneering actions to address vital issues concerning sustainable development and climate change. Our message to the world, supported by the youth in the Youth Climate Conclave 2023 pledge, is this: incremental pledges need to transform into meteoric climate actions. Now I would like to hand over mic to Shreyas.
Thank you, Dennis. It is indeed an honor to be sharing the stage with stalwarts of climate action and sustainable development. We believe that if enough individuals can be mobilized, the opportunity for change is exponential. It is to this end, to nudge action, to raise ambition, to encourage dialogue, and to bring like-minded people together, that we have come out with a 10-point Act4Earth Manifesto. Through this, we pledge to act for Earth by bringing together stakeholders, including governments, businesses, civil society, women and youth, for creating a paradigm shift in the process of policy making and visioning of much-needed climate action. Reorienting anthropocentric worldviews to nature-centric approaches in policy and governance for intergenerational and intragenerational equity for all life on planet Earth. Developing actionable frameworks on sustainable consumption and lifestyles by promoting science-based actions, deriving inspiration from indigenous communities, driving policy change, reorienting markets, and enabling social transformation innovations. Identifying linkages and good practices within and across sustainable development goals. Amplifying global South perspectives on important focus areas on global norms around global goal on adaptation, financing loss and damage, climate finance, global stocktake, and transparency. Informing and steering deliberations on key areas aimed towards fostering green growth and development to achieve meaningful outcomes in the G20 fora. Realizing the criticality of the energy trilemma and develop supply and demand solutions using a systems approach. Advocating for nature-based solutions through means such as sustainable agricultural practices to ensure food security while simultaneously ensuring climate resilience and ecosystem integrity. Fostering integration and mainstreaming of sustainable development through policy innovations such as green budgeting. And finally, addressing global commons governance gaps by strengthening the climate-oceans interface. Through this, we pledge to act for Earth. Before we conclude, I would like to inform that the next phase of the Act4Earth initiative will focus on the following two components: the COP28 Compass and the SDG Charter. Under the COP28 Compass, efforts will be focused on understanding the priorities ahead of COP28 at UAE. The COP28 Compass will also focus on the idea of sustainable lifestyles and charting pathways for meaningful and sustainable climate action. The SDG Charter aims to contribute to more inclusive and ambitious policy frameworks so that sustainable development and green growth stay a priority area in the government's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreyas and Dennis. I would now request to call upon stage Ms. Riddhi Mukherjee, student at TERI-SAS, to release the 12th edition of Vasundhara Magazine.
Good evening and greetings to all the dignitaries and everyone present here today. I bring to you Vasundhara, the sustainability magazine of TERI-SAS, a student-run publication that encapsulates a wide range of perspectives, both from area specialists and students on a variety of current topics. The aim of Vasundhara is to give the students' voices a platform and aware them beyond their disciplines. I am Riddhi Mukherjee, the sub-editor of this edition, and it gives me great honor to bring to you the 12th edition of Vasundhara, Genesis, Tech for the Future. Genesis focuses on sustainable technology and its importance in a greener future. The articles focus on the uses and importance of sustainable technology in various sectors such as agriculture, mobility, health, construction, among others. The issue provides a blend of the technical aspects with various geographical and socio-economic ones, with our own effort of explaining the future through decoding the new green growth budget. We had the privilege to reach out to Professor Debajit Palit of NTPC Business School and Mr. Anson Wondo of IIT Madras Research Park and showcase their insights through conversation. Some knowledge bits and success stories to encourage and motivate the youth have also been included. This issue has been created with the hard work of 24 TERI-SAS students and the immense support of our faculty and staff. I hope you have a wonderful time going through the edition, and this ignites more conversation and efforts for a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ridhi. I would now like to invite Dr. Vibha Dhaban, Director General, the Energy and Resources Institute, for the vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Well, thank you so much. And really speaking, the end, I'll say it is always difficult. So much has been said, and we were enjoying the discussions for so long that we actually wanted those to continue, because I'll put it this way, this particular WSDS, we haven't just discussed the problems, we actually started discussing the way forward, so which is extremely important. And I'll actually like to thank each one of you, my gratitude for participating in person and virtually. Thank you so much to all of you. On behalf of TERI family, I express my sincere gratitude to all the dignitaries, especially those who traveled all the way to New Delhi from across the world to be with us. The preparations for the 2024 edition of the summit have already begun, as Shelley and her colleagues have presented. The theme and tentative dates, again, we have announced those, and we do look forward to your suggestions. If you feel we have missed anything which needs to be included, please do that, because you are part of TERI family by participating in this particular edition of WSDS. I also urge all stakeholders to participate in Act4Earth dialogues, for which the team will be bringing out 4 sets of policy briefs by COP28 in Dubai. I am particularly happy to share that the summit, in tandem with its knowledge initiative Act4Earth, which was launched last year, has engaged in topics that need further attention of the world leaders, including through the G20 and COP28 forums. Distinguished guests on the dais, I thank you for gracing this occasion and being part of TERI's journey towards making sustainable development a globally shared goal. Her Excellency, Ms. Nala Boden, Prime Minister Tunisia, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri ji, Mr. Simon Steele, His Excellency Mr. Ugo Astuto, Dr. Ajay Mathur, my former colleague, Honorable Justice Pratibha Singh, Dr. Renu Swarup, with whom I have perhaps worked my entire life, professional life, Mr. Nitin Desai, Chairman, the Energy and Resources Institute, and a great mentor for all of us. And I'll also like to thank Dr. Pachauri, under whose leadership we have conceived the idea of first doing Delhi Sustainable Development Summit and then graduated to the WSDS. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for the support extended by our nodal ministry, that's Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. They have supported this initiative right from its inception. And I'll say it's not just a support, it is that we also get ideas from them, and they have become a part and parcel of this particular initiative. So all possible help that we can expect from them, we are getting it all the time. On behalf of TERI and the World Sustainable Development Team, I thank all our partners for supporting WSDS 2023 and Act4Earth, Royal Norwegian Embassy, Bloomberg Philanthropies, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection, IKI, European Union, World Bank, Tata Chemical, TERI School of Advanced Studies, International Energy Agency, Carnegie Climate Governance Initiative, Johnson Control, Capgemini, and McKinsey. Now, this entire list of our supporters, in a way, proves that, first of all, TERI works across different partners, and also their faith in TERI. And I'll also like to take this opportunity as a thank giving to all our partners, because TERI is what it is because of their support. And most of you are aware, we are not-for-profit research organization established 49 years back. We are going to be 50 next year, and with the objective of that we will work on problems that mankind will face in the future. And the very fact we are not-for-profit, it talks volumes of our organization that whatever we do, that is for the society. And sustainability, when we talk about renewable energy, climate change, now these are the things which are engraved, I should say, in each one of us all the time. We are only thinking of this, and all our programs, ultimately it is, first of all, how they are going to help, for whom we are trying to work, and how will we take the message for whom we are doing research. So therefore, we are involved in policy, we are involved in research, we are involved in implementation, with the ultimate objective of working for the society. I'll also like to thank our International Steering Committee members who have guided us on this journey. I'll also like to thank the Advocacy Committee of World Sustainable Development Summit and our outreach partners. Towards the end, I would like to thank entire TERI team who worked tirelessly for this summit. And of course, most of the time we used to invite them to the stage, but this time they have done a beautiful job of putting a short video of a minute. So I'll request them just to play that before we further give them a round of applause for their hard work. So special thanks to the team, and I'll say more special thanks for all of you to be part of this particular edition, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we conclude the World Sustainable Development Summit 2023, and I thank all the dignitaries and all the participants for joining us. It has been my pleasure and privilege to host this session. We look forward to seeing you all next year. I request you all to join us for the high tea.